Okay, we're now recording, so welcome Afterlife University / Afterlife Topics. We're doing an interview right now with Nicole de Haas from Amsterdam, so international right now. I'm in Indonesia, she's in Amsterdam, most of the audience is in USA, so we have going all over the world right now, and you might be watching this on YouTube. So if so, hopefully you'll enjoy this interview. Nicole de Haas is a physical medium, and we talk about that sometimes on this channel or on the group. And I'm sure most people know what physical mediumship is, but we'll dive into it with Nicole here. So let's switch over to her real quick. Nicole, how you doing?
Thank you, Cyrus. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm a physical medium, but I didn't start my journey as a physical medium, of course. And you want me to share something about my development and how I ended up into physical mediumship?
Yep, that was actually going to be my first question. So basically what you just said, if you don't mind talking a little bit about your background and how that led to physical mediumship.
Yeah, sure. In the past, I used to work as a psychologist and kinesiologist. So I did a lot of other work before mediumship came into my life. I always have been very sensitive, even, when I grew up as a child. I was very sensitive and I had some interesting experiences. But at that moment, I did not understand that I was actually getting information from the spirit world or from the people around me. So it took me quite some years, and eventually I was in my mid-20s, and then I started doing healing and some psychic development, and slowly the mediumship came in. So that was basically how it all unfolded. I started doing mental mediumship first, and it took about, let's say, 4 or 5 years before trance and eventually slowly the physical development came in. So it was quite a journey so far, and still is.
So my big question then is, what were the first signs of physical mediumship? What were your initial symptoms that you were developing that way?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of physical phenomena around me happening in the rooms where I was, but I didn't quite understand what was happening. At one point, we started having a circle, and at that time, I go back, let's say 12 years ago, I had no clue what to do. So we just sat with a group of like-minded people, and we sat for the spirit world, and we enjoyed ourselves. In that stage, I got into a trance state more and more. But still, we had no clue what to do. So we sat in red light, and basically all we did was sitting together. Sometimes we sang, sometimes we did not. So we had phenomena like rappings, strange things with music, cold winds, etc., but not big things, basically. And there was one evening where I decided to sit in a cabinet, because I used to sit for another developing medium for 2 years. He wanted to develop physical mediumship, but actually nothing happened in those 2 years, so he decided to stop. And we were sitting in my home every 2 weeks. So on one night, the cabinet was still in my home, I decided to sit in it, and I had really a nice experience, actually. I got into trance state, and it was, I felt the love of the spirit world. But I also felt a sharp pain on my solar plexus. And when I got out of trance and out of the cabinet, I noticed like they cut me with a knife, like this size. It was like a scratch all over my stomach area. So we took pictures of that, and it lasted for 2 days, but it puzzled me tremendously because I had no clue what happened. Well, it took me another, let's say, 1.5 years until I met David Thompson years ago, and he's a physical medium from New Zealand, and he said at that time, I recognized that sign, you must sit for physical. And in the meantime, I had all kinds of phenomena around me, but again, I couldn't explain what was happening, basically.
So this would mean that you were producing ectoplasm, correct?
Yes, I produce ectoplasm, but not at that time, not in the early stages.
I see. Okay, so that would mean that you are both an energetic medium as well as ectoplasmic medium. Is that correct?
No, not really. And let me explain a little bit. I develop in the traditional way. So the spirit world uses ectoplasm to manifest themselves. And for those who don't know what ectoplasm is a substance, the life force or extension of the life force of the medium, being exuded from my body under the right circumstances by the spirit world and molded into something that they can use for materialization or to create other phenomena, a direct voice or whatsoever. What happened in the beginning, a lot of physical mediums do have physical phenomena around them because their energy cannot manifest it somehow within the seance room. So as soon as I started to sit for physical mediumship with a circle in harmony and love for the spirit world, the phenomena around me stopped. So it was basically an indication that I had some kind of energy, that the spirit world was around me in a different way, but it stopped when I started sitting in the circle, basically.
I see. So now that you've discovered you have this ability, so when you are now doing a physical seance, what types of phenomena can we expect in your seances? Are you able to produce materializations yet, or anything of that nature, or what typically goes on in your seances?
Yeah. You must understand, all of you must understand that the traditional way of developing, so the ectoplasmic based phenomena, take many years of development. So I'm still developing, and I always say also to my students, you will be the best medium on the day you die. In other words, development takes a lifelong. What we have so far is we have development of direct voice, we have materialization. It started actually with the materialization of my cat in spirit a few years ago. And it seems easier. It's something that happens more often also when you look back in history. It seems easier for animals to materialize because they don't have the brain barrier in the way. So it's much easier for the spirit world to cloak them in ectoplasm than a human mind, so to say.
Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. So what exactly is the brain barrier, and how does that relate to being cloaked in ectoplasm? Because when I think of being cloaked, I think of a spirit person in the room on that wavelength, and then they're literally like putting a substance around their body. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you go to spirit, you don't have a physical body anymore. You have your etheric body, and you have your consciousness goes with you because that survives death. So when you go to the spirit world, it's your etheric body that is being cloaked into the ectoplasm. But it's a mind process as well. So imagine that if you are in spirit, you have to remind yourself of how you looked like when you were on the earth. So the thought process plays a big part in the whole process of physical mediumship and materialization, even with direct voice. Because when you speak through a trumpet, the spirit world has no physical voice anymore. So they can't literally speak. What they do is they project their thoughts into the ether, into the voice box, and it will manifest into our vibration as sound.
Okay.
And that's
so I have a little bit of a follow-up question then. So because I've also heard this concept a lot with physical mediumship. So when in regards to the ethereal or astral body and having to remember what you looked like on Earth, Is that always the case? Because I am also under the impression that many people in their ethereal or astral bodies still look like what they look like here. But would this be in reference if somebody has changed on that side? For instance, they look very young, or perhaps they've taken on a different form entirely. Do you have any insight about that?
Well, all I know is if we take a look, for instance, at one of my spirit people who works with me. I have a 9-year-old boy, Tommy, and Tommy works with me in my seances in physical mediumship. He presents himself as a 9-year-old boy. He passed to the spirit world long time ago as a 9-year-old boy, and he died from fever at that time. He explained to us once, and he gave me an experience in the spirit world, seeing him not as a 9-year-old boy anymore, but as a grown man. And he explained to me that the person who comes back into the seance room is that 9-year-old boy, but in spirit, he's spiritually matured.
Got it. So that makes a lot of sense. So astral or etherically, astrally, you are continuing to develop, or you take the form with which you desire to take.
Yeah.
But when you come into the seance, is it like, is there a law that you appear as you once did, or basically they just direct the person coming through to attempt to look like they used to, so that it is proper experience? Because it's like, if I guess
Yeah.
if he looked like a grown adult man, it wouldn't be the same experience. Or if, let's say, a loved one is coming through, want to look.
Well, first of all, most physical mediums, most materialization mediums work in darkness, because ectoplasm is very sensitive to light. And I burned myself twice in the past, so I'm very, very, very careful. So first of all, you don't see the materialization. You can hear the materialization, you can feel the materialization, but you can't see it as such. Although we had an experience where the spirit world was able to bring their own illumination into the ectoplasm, so people could see the man taking shape and taking a form, a human form. But we only had that once or twice. If people materialize and come back basically from spirit into our vibration, they want to be recognized, they want to be known. So to me, it makes sense that they come back for their loved ones in the way they are recognized.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I guess what's interesting to me is the process of entering the seance. Something I do is out of body experiences, right? So I've been out of my body on that side in the astral ethereal body, which can very much look and feel like our body that we're in right now, except it is possible to shapeshift or change it. So when you are coming into that into the seance, so you say it's both a combination of like a mental and physical process. Because what I hear about being coated in ectoplasm, so I picture in my mind like literally like somebody taking the substance out of your body and it like leaking into that wavelength and having it cover my astral ethereal body. Is that at all accurate, or is it more like a different process? Is there any way to like wrap one's mind around how that works?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure if we know the exact process yet. All we know is that they explain to us, and I've said in many, many seances with other physical mediums, is that it's a mixture of using their etheric body and the thought process, because the spirit world is a world of thought. And thought is a very powerful aspect of the mind. So if the spirit world wants to come back into the seance room, they have to use their thought and make that imprint within the ectoplasm as well. it's like going back, you know, if I work as a mental medium and the spirit world links with me, they give me information about their lives, their jobs, how they passed, whatsoever. And that's a thought, it's a mental process, it's a mind-to-mind process. Well, that process is not the same in a seance room because I'm in trance, I'm out of the way. So it's a direct objective process. But still, we have been told that the thought process helps in the materialization and in the whole manifestation process.
Got it. Something I heard when I went to a David Thompson seance, his guide, or the Timmy, correct? The
Yeah.
boy comes there as a boy, mentioned that on that side, creating things with thought or being able to manifest with thought takes a degree of skill. And then he explained that many people who cross over from this side, they may still look like they did, as for example, an elderly person may still look like an elderly person for a while until they learn how to change their astral ethereal body in such a way that they have control over it. Have you heard anything like that as well? I see you're agreeing.
Yeah, well, we have been told the same, and I have heard other recordings as well of pioneers from the past where the same theory was explained. So I guess that there is a truth in it. Like I said with Tommy, he comes back as a 9-year-old boy, not because he cannot come back as an adult. He could if he wants to, if he projects his thought into the ectoplasm and wants to come back as a more mature man. I'm sure he could do it. There is an example within the mediumship of Alec Harris. He was one of the most famous materialization mediums. And at one point, the spirit world did an experiment, and there was a girl coming from the cabinet, and she worked within the spirit team. And this girl got the question, how do you look like in the spirit world? Are you still the same girl? And then she said, do you want to see me how I look in the spirit world? And this happened in red light. And the little girl changed within the ectoplasm into a grown woman and back into a child.
Well, and what I like about this direct contact with that side is that it kind of dispels a common trope or perspective that everybody who dies is an intangible orb of light who exists kind of like in a lava lamp of colors, and that's what the spirit world looks like. But it seems like every time that we encounter or speak to people living on that side, or I have experiences where I go to that side, that's not the case at all. It seems to still be very much the kind of a human society. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I think, and we have been told, sometimes I think we put the spirit world way too much on a pedestal. You know, they are just people like you and I. They might have progressed a little further along the road. They might know a little more, but still they are very much the same people.
Right, and so what I find also cool is that going to the out-of-body world, what I came to discover was that my experiences on that side matched everything that I've heard from physical mediumship. So Leslie Flint, David Thompson, like hearing all the descriptions about that side. When I began having experiences and going there and hanging out with people and asking questions, all of it matched with everything I'd ever heard from physical mediumship. So I think that's one of those areas of, like, I call like convergence. So different subjects in this field converge with information that we get from other areas. Have you heard anything interesting about people's lifestyles on that side that maybe you want to share? Because you mentioned before talking about their jobs or existences on that side. Does anything pop into your mind that you find interesting about what people are doing in the I call it the fourth density, or the other side?
Yeah, Well, one of the things that I found very interesting to hear, and that was already a few years ago, was that the spirit world also needs mediums in the spirit world. And I found it a very interesting theory because I never thought about it that way. You know, we in our physical world, we need mediums to be the instrument for the spirit world to either manifest themselves or to make themselves known through the mental process of mental mediumship. The interesting thing was, and I think it was mentioned in one of Leslie Flynn's seances, where Estelle Roberts explained that mediums are still necessary in the spirit world to make that connection between different spheres or levels, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about this as well. I had a communication with Leslie Flint through the mental medium Suzanne Wilson, and Flint was basically talking about how he works as a medium on that side. And it does seem like, what we experience here with our deceased loved ones being separated by this dimensional barrier, the same thing seems to happen on that side, that people become separated by these dimensional barriers. And then there have to be these kind of go-betweens to be able to communicate. So that's also something that I've heard as well. So among your spirit team, I'm glad I just remembered this question that was on my notepad. But my notepad is there. I want to get it. When you were in the seance, is there a kind of like, I've heard in other physical seances that there is like a team in place to prevent negative influence or entities coming through that we don't want to come through, that is like a security team. Do you have a similar thing in place when you're having seances? Is there like a burly dude sitting at the door keeping negative entities in that kind of in-between realm from coming through? Do you have any kind of like a security protocol like that?
No, we don't have it, and I'm going to explain to you why. Never ever in my whole career as a medium or my whole development as a medium, I have been afraid of the spirit world. Never. I worked as a psychologist, and a lot of experiences that people have, even experiences that I had where I thought the spirit world was involved, I can explain in a different way. And I think we sometimes point to the spirit world and say, oh, it's the spirit world doing this. And it's not, it's basically something else happening. So, I don't believe in protection because I know that the world that we work with is a world of love. I know I have a strong spirit team. And to be honest, Cyrus, the only world I think we have to be scared about is this world, not the spirit world. So I never have any situation where I felt strange or scared or whatsoever. I once had a situation, but it was not in the seance room, and that was in my early stage of development. But that was at the time where I did not understand what was happening, and eventually I found out it was my own fear manifesting itself in my energy.
Got it. Interesting. So I believe that David Thompson said that he uses like a security protocol for negative entities, but maybe this is a difference in how.
No, he does not. He does not. All we do, and David as well, all we do is a prayer. We have an opening prayer, and that's what we do, but we don't ask basically for real protection. We have an opening prayer, and all we ask is for love, basically. That's all we do. But we do have a protocol, protection protocol, that we use in this world, because this world is much more dangerous to us physical mediums than the spirit world. People who come into the seance room, they are the real dangers.
Of course. So you said you've been injured before. Is that correct? So if you don't mind sharing what happened?
Yeah, sure. I have a very experimental nature, let's put it that way. So I like to experiment, I like to try new things. And in my early stages of physical development, I started in red light, but eventually went to dark conditions. And at one point, at a stage where I started to produce ectoplasm, we thought it might be nice to do an experiment with taking photographs. So that's what we did, and it was in red light. Pictures have been taken, but within 2 or 3 minutes after we started, the spirit world stopped the whole experiment and said to the circle leader, we have to stop now because Nicole is injured. So they stopped it, and I came back, and fortunately it was in time, so I only had to cool myself for 3 hours, and I had a burn on my solar plexus.
And I suppose as an experimenter, you probably took a photo of the burn.
Yes, we did, and we even have a photo where the ectoplasm is being produced. So I have some memories to that situation. Yes.
It's always funny with the skeptics. One reason I was excited to bring you on is because there is this the skeptical perspective of physical mediumship is that they're all frauds, and it's very funny because it's truly an either or situation, because you can't be partially a fraud with the physical mediumship. Someone's a fraud or they're not. Whereas with mental mediumship, the skeptics can sometimes argue, well, they think they're a medium, but it's just their imaginations.
Yeah.
Whereas what I find is that if someone is developing as a physical medium, it rules out the possibility of fraud, because a fraud isn't going to spend years developing an ability with many, many people also participating until essentially something paranormal begins happening. So very much this excludes the possibility of there being any kind of a fraud. So I guess my question for you is, do you ever deal with skeptics, and do you have a way of being able to, I suppose, defend your position? And what would you say to people who are still skeptical about physical mediumship?
Yeah. When I started doing mediumship, I think I fell into the trap of trying to convince people. And I found out along the way that it's not up to me to convince people, basically. All I can do as a medium is give people an experience, and then it's up to them what they do with it. I do agree with you, we don't sit in the dark, strapped in a chair, gagged in a cabinet every week for years and years and years because we just do something, or it's, in my opinion, it's a way of life. It's a passion, or even more than a passion. And I do know that true physical mediumship can only manifest, can only be developed if you are living your life in a spiritual sense. Because in my opinion, spirituality should go hand in hand with physical mediumship and mediumship in general. It does not always, but I can assure you that if a physical medium is not honest or has a different agenda, then the unfoldment will stop. Then you will see that the physical phenomena will stay the same, and that there is no progression.
So do you make available any of the recordings of your seances, or any messages from any of your spirit team, or people who may want to listen to, even read transcriptions about what they have to say, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, there is something exciting coming up, but I can only share with you a little bit. Leslie Kane, she is a writer from America, a journalist. She wrote the book Surviving Death. I don't know if you know the book.
Yeah, I've actually talked to her before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there is a film company in the United States, and they are going to make a documentary based on the book Surviving Death. There will be an 1.5-hour episode on physical mediumship, and they come to the Zwanenhof in Holland in May from America, the crew, to film me for 6 days because I will be involved in the documentary. So they will get some of my audio. They will be able to, not to film the actual seance because that's not possible in dark, but they will film everything around it, the whole procedures, and I will be scientifically researched with EEG, and they will film everything. So that will be quite interesting for people to come.
Yeah, Leslie Kean. Interesting story about her. I helped edit a book called Awakened by Death, co-authored with Karen Swain. The original title of the book was Surviving Death, right? So it's the same title of Kean's book. So we had to get in touch with her to see how she felt about that. And she was reluctant, but agreed that she, it was okay. But then it came to Karen Swain's, like, popped into her mind to use the title Awakened by Death. So we didn't have to use the same title after all. But I was able to talk to Kean as well a little bit during that process. But I wanted to mention how important that Kean is because she's so influential kind of in the disclosure of all these subjects. So she's also influential in the disclosure of certain extraterrestrial subjects last year or 2 years ago. In relation to a Pentagon program that was studying UFOs. So she kind of spearheaded that, and that's been enormously influential. And now life after death as well, which I also see as part of this global disclosure process of changing paradigms. So I'm going to open up to some questions from like the audience. I wanted to ask you one more question from my end, which was, are there any messages that you get from your spirit team that you find particularly interesting that maybe you want to share? Any messages that come up again and again? Anything that you wanted to mention that they often talk about?
Well, what I think is important to mention, and this is something we see in Holland coming back more and more, is that people go back to the home circle and sit more again for the spirit world. A lot of people think that you can go to a course to learn mediumship, but I can assure you there is no teacher who can teach you to become a medium. It's only the spirit world being able to unfold the gift of spirit and unfold the gift of mediumship. So we need to give and dedicate our time to the unseen world. And that is something that the spirit world is inspiring people to do again more, to sit like they used to sit in the past with like-minded people, just with the intention to connect to the other world and to allow them to unfold. And I think if we learn to listen more to that, and if we go back in that sense to the old ways of sitting, I think that traditional physical mediumship has much more future, basically. So that's one of the things they shared with us. One of the other things, and they always find new ways. I'm not saying they will only do the traditional way. The spirit world will find new ways as well. Our world progresses and they progress as well. I do feel that there will be a more important connection again between physical mediumship and science. And in a way, I do hope so, that that bridge will be built more. And the spirit world also gave us some insight in their wish eventually to create a more safe environment for the physical medium to work in and to bring in their own light into the seance room so that there is no need for external light.
Something that popped into my head real quick before I finish off here. You're familiar, I suppose, with Sonia Rinaldi, and so she does work with Nikola Tesla from that side. So do you feel like there's a big scientific team on that side that is trying to figure these things out? Any thoughts about that? If you had any communications with any scientists?
Absolutely. We have received different indications and messages in different physical circles that some great minds are very much involved. Yes.
Interesting. It almost seems like it's something that they're trying to like they're challenged with, which again goes back to the concept that they're not all knowing, that
Mm.
godlike entities. I mean, the astral civilization, and in some ways, it's a continuation of our world with different rules in place, so they don't have access to everything. They require scientific establishment to figure these things out, which I think is very interesting. Okay, so I know there's a bunch of people in the room. A lot of people who don't normally participate in Afterlife University, so welcome. A bunch of you guys joined late. So if anybody has any questions, I'll open that up for this remaining like 20 minutes or so. So how we'll do that is I've unmuted a bunch of you guys. So there is a keyboard command to raise the hand, but I think it's going to be too complicated to figure that out. So basically, I'm going to say if you have a question, just like in a classroom, first to speak up, you'll get the question. And if everyone speaks up at once, then I'm just going to have to pick somebody, okay? So if you have a question, let's go ahead and do it now.
I have a question.
Corey, you got it.
Is it the same people in your circle every week, or are there different people coming in all the time?
No, it's in the home circle. It's the same people every week. Same people, same format, same music, same room, same time. Everything is the same. We have sometimes we organize guest circles on a different night, and those are nights where we invite guests from outside to participate, basically. But the home circle every Tuesday night we sit is always with the same people. Yeah.
How do you verify information, or what's the, with evidential mediumship, you're getting evidence. I suppose you are as well, but if it's the same people all the time, it seems like it would just kind of repeat itself.
Yeah. Well, the seances we do, I do seances with people from outside. For instance, I run 2 transphysical courses at the One-Off per year. And last December, I did 2 seances, and there were 30 people in each seance, and I have only 5 people in my home circle. And on both nights, a loved one materialized, and I was able to give proof of their lives. And those are people that I have no knowledge about.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Corey. So we have a question actually in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and address that one. It's by actually a new member of Afterlife University, Sam. Sam wants to know, can you still do activities on the other side, hobbies, for instance, like flying an airplane is what Sam likes to do. Have you heard anything about that from your spirit friends?
I can imagine. All I know is that there is a boy working with Stuart Alexander, and he is a physical medium from the UK. And that boy is called Christopher. And Christopher is also active sometimes in our circle. And he always explains how much he still likes to fish, for instance. And that was something that he liked doing when he was on the earth, basically. But he's one of the few people that keeps coming back with those stories.
I guess I'll jump in as well. And so like my experience, out of body experiences, and basically like I'll go out of body, I'll interview people on that side. I've yet to find anybody say that there's anything that you can't exactly do on that side. I've come to find like there's busy streets with cars, but it's different than here in the sense that people have sometimes modified those cars to be able to fly. So it's kind of like there's lots of things happening on that side that you won't see here that might not be possible here. But there is still even the example of fishing, which is unusual because that involves killing a fish, right? And I've inquired about that specifically and had the answer that certain creatures on like the animal group soul level may still be may still involve entropy as we know it. So a creature may actually die on that side if you eat and cook a fish, which is very unusual because I never imagined that kind of thing. But when I've inquired about that to people on that side, because I was specifically wondering about fishing, that's the answer I've had. So I'm always, taken aback and learning new weird things when I've had my experiences. But
Yeah.
I guess as that relates to flying an airplane, and there's no reason you wouldn't be able to. Like the way I see it is that the astral world is corresponding to our world. So it's like our world, but it's a wavelength higher. So that's why it would seem that there's equivalence on that side of the landmarks and the cities. On this side, it's a higher wavelength, a higher vibration of like the same world we're on. And this is, of course, there's only one place people go to when they die. There's many different worlds, many different realms.
Yeah.
But that's all that's a big topic. Okay, so who else has a question for Nicole? I'm just going to say, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, okay? 1, 2, 3, go. Anybody? Never mind. Lots of people here, but maybe, I don't know if everybody has their microphones hooked up either, so this is a lot of people's first time using Zoom as well, so.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Who is speaking?
That's me. It's Kim. Usually I have my camera on, but I am not wearing any makeup, and I look really like pajama-y right now. Also, I want to apologize because my son is carrying in groceries, so and he's wearing slippers, so it's kind of busy. I missed a lot of the beginning part of the meeting, but a couple of concepts were touched on that I've just been curious about, but none of them relate to my question, which is a concept that comes up in groups where people discuss contact with loved ones and stuff, and also just things from mediums that I know. It's kind of a hard question to articulate, but are people impeded, like even people who are mediums who are like really good at it, is it harder to contact the people you know? Because like I've also speculated about that with out-of-body experiences, that like if people could do stuff like that very easily, they might not attend to their regular lives. Does that question make sense? Sorry for the background noise.
I can only share my own experience with you, and from what I've seen with others. I have many people in spirit, many loved ones in spirit, and for me it's quite difficult actually to be in touch with them on a regular basis. It's more easy for me to connect to people I don't know than to my own loved ones. I know that they are there. I've had some experiences with them, but they are not around that often.
Like, do you think that's by design, not like an edict, but just kind of like it's slightly harder to kind of challenge us to not fall into the same patterns and, seek the same people out, to kind of like it sounds like they need mediums. Like I've always kind of felt like in the past year, which is how long I've been looking into this stuff, mediums seem to be like in demand, and it seems like they're getting tapped kind of to activate, if that makes sense.
Do you mean with in demand that we demand the spirit world?
Like the spirit world needs more people to be performing this, like the service, and people are kind of being called into service. Yeah,
well, I think, mediumship is as old as mankind, and I think in every time, in every era, there was a need for mediums, basically. What I think, one of the reasons why it could be that it's more difficult to be in touch with your own loved ones, often in the early stages of development, we do have those experiences. We do have those experiences with our parents, grandparents, whoever, children, whoever there are in spirit. But as soon as we start to understand the mechanics of mediumship, as soon as we start to develop, then they know and see that we build more confidence in being with the spirit world. So yes, you will get new experiences, and you will get new experiences to unfold and to progress in your own mediumship. And of course they will be around, but not with the purpose of constantly letting you know that they are there. Okay. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of what I was thinking, it seems like.
Yeah.
Cool. Does anybody else have a burning question they want to ask Nicole while she's here with us?
I think Keely had a question that she typed in. Something's wrong with her mic or something.
Oh, is it on the chat screen? Oh, I see it. Okay, hold on. So I want to get this right. The ectoplasm that she creates comes out and then melts. Okay, so Keely is asking, so you create ectoplasm.
Yeah.
Ectoplasm is the thing that allows the spirit to come through. The answer, of course, is yes. I don't know if there's a way to elaborate on that.
Well, if we take a look at physical mediumship, there are two forms of physical mediumship, and you already mentioned briefly the energy-based form, and we have the ectoplasmic-based form. Spirit can manifest also without ectoplasm in an energy-based physical circle, but that's a whole different procedure. In my case, they work in the traditional way, and then yes, then there is ectoplasm being used to create that voice box or to manipulate it for other purposes within the seance room.
Cool. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Seems like we have some shy people here tonight, but that's okay. So, well, I have another question for you, actually. Are there any misconceptions or myths about either physical mediumship and or the afterlife itself that maybe you want to address?
Whew, that's that's a rather complicated question, because I think that there are a lot of misconceptions. And I sometimes even question, how much do we know? How much do we, even as mediums, how much do we really know? I think we only see fragments of the whole picture, basically, and we try to understand and to comprehend something that goes beyond our physical brain, that is beyond our understanding. And I do know that some of us, and it's the same with you, Cyrus, we get those glimpses of how it is, or how it looks like, or how it is experienced. But still, I think a lot of people here in this world do have certain ideas and thoughts, but basically founded on fear.
Okay. Let's see. So let's just think if there's a way to follow up with that question, actually. Sometimes there's a lot of debate in the afterlife communities about the conditions, and sometimes mediums say very conflicting things. So you'll have one medium saying, this is actually typically in mental mediumship, they will say, well, the afterlife is this way, and then a different medium will say, no, it's actually this way. Examples of that is that some people say that there's no variation in realms. We all go to only one type of place. And then other people will say there's actually many, many, many different wavelengths depending on the state of mind.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, do you encounter inconsistencies like that? Do you think that this is related to mediums not having access to information? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think what you just described shows also the influence of the medium in the whole process. You know, like I said, as a medium, we cannot get the full picture. And I must also say, I said in the beginning, we shouldn't put the spirit world on a pedestal. Even in the spirit world, they disagree on things. Even in the spirit world, people are on different states of consciousness, different states of stages of development. So I think that even in spirit, people can only give according to their stage of development at that time, and that's what they brought back.
And I also feel like it might have to do with preferences, or like the elemental nature of a specific soul. So some souls, they really like these things, and other souls, they really like those things, and they might be presenting a bit of a bias toward that. So like near-death experiences, sometimes we'll have an NDE where somebody will be in like a very religious place, so they'll see God on a throne with a big white beard. And then that'll cause all this controversy, because then it's like, well, where is this idea coming from? It's very much in conflict. So it definitely seems like, yeah, we still deal with that disparity of information. That's something that people have to navigate. All right, so well, we're almost at the hour mark. Does anybody else have any questions or ideas they want to address? Questions for Nicole?
There's a couple more down there.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there's stuff in the chat screen. Okay, let me take a look. Thanks for helping me out, Corey. From Kim, Kim, you have a similar question. Does that mean you have a new question, Kim, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like a follow-on question. And it's just kind of like a mediumship perspective question. When you asked that question, Cyrus, it reminded me of like being in the group. I've been in the group maybe for like a year now. And it seems like there are these waves of certain fears that people have, and they kind of like kick up and then die down. And I know like one that we see a lot is people are afraid that their loved ones have reincarnated, sometimes like really quickly. And yesterday somebody made a comment somebody was talking about not hearing from them or receiving a sign. And then somebody said, well, maybe they went up in levels, but it was like a really short period of time. And I was just wondering if, as a medium and interacting with people who are, you know, in this kind of like, where they're looking to their loved ones, and do you think there are any beliefs that are like really pervasively limiting that people should know about? You don't like there's so many fears that I hear over and over, and it seems like they get addressed and then they come back. Are there any like really super common fears that seem to be something that the spirit world has kind of like said like they've settled, but the fear is still very common? Does that question make sense?
You mentioned the example, for instance, about reincarnation. You know, everywhere I come as a medium, whether I work as a physical medium or a mental medium, a lot of people have those questions. I think it's our job as mediums not always to give the answer, because sometimes we just don't have the answer, but to take away fear and to bring in more love into this world, and to touch other people's hearts and souls, because that's what we need to do. I never encountered a situation where the spirit world would have reincarnated before their loved ones came over, because to me that's not love. I noticed in some cases as an excuse to be able to get in touch with the person.
I think we're breaking up.
You understand where I'm?
Are we having some? You guys hear Nicole okay, or are we having connection issues?
She's breaking up a little, yeah.
Nicole, are you still with us?
Okay, but could you say?
Hello, Nicole, are you with us?
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you now. I think your internet went out there for a moment.
Oh, okay.
But you're making some really good points about reincarnation, and I think we missed a chunk of it. But I think in essence, so what you are saying is that in your experience, nobody reincarnates before their loved ones cross over. So that, and I also noticed, you know, personally, and like what I've studied is that often people will reincarnate multidimensionally, and so they will still be themselves on that side, but like a different facet of themselves will incarnate again. But then there's like two.
Yeah.
Have you encountered anything like that, Nicole? Any information?
Well, all I know is that one of my spirit people, one of my main controls, Silver Cloud, he once explained it as facets of a diamond, and that there are different facets of a diamond living different expressions of life.
Okay, exactly. So that's exactly like Silver Birch says, and that's exactly like the message I have tried to come across when people have inquired about this. So I think also, to piggyback on what Kim said, that might be a good example of like when it's kind of like these fearful misconceptions that come across, because sometimes I'll hear people, even people who call themselves mediums, saying, "Oh, I can't get in touch. Grandpa Henry probably reincarnated, that's why we can't get in touch with him." Instead of just saying, "Well, it's because I'm not able to make a connection," when they come up with a reason.
Yeah.
Now, I think that can be very harmful to do that instead of just explaining like, "Hey, I don't have a connection there."
Yes, and we have a big responsibility.
Right. And there's definitely, and this is something that I try to reinforce, is be very careful of like mental mediums are not vetted, that kind of come out of nowhere. So like in a group like Afterlife Topics with 8,000 people, right? And sometimes we get the equivalent of like Facebook drifters. So somebody will be prowling around looking to do readings. But I often say be very mindful about their mutual friends. So if someone's actually part of the community, that they're usually going to be more likely as somebody you can trust. But if it's somebody coming along with like a rainbow Facebook profile with like 6 people on the friends page saying, "Hey, I'll do a reading for you," I mean, that we have to be very discriminating about that kind of thing. So our hour is almost up. So we have time for a couple more questions. Does anybody have
one more from Keely down there?
Okay, so let me check that. Thanks, Corey.
Got her hand up. She's going, oh.
Okay. So Keely is asking, when you got burnt, was it the ectoplasm itself that burnt you, or was it some other property that resulted in the burning?
Okay, so what happens is that when ectoplasm, especially in the early stages of development, when ectoplasm is exposed to light, or for instance to touch without permission of the spirit world, then it shoots back into the physical body of the medium. And it goes with such a speed that speed causes the burn. That's what happens basically.
So it's like a friction-based burn. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool, that answers that. I think we have room for one, maybe 2 more questions. Anybody else have a burning question they want to ask? It's your last chance. We have a real physical medium here. Anybody?
There's one more down there.
Okay, let's see. From Sam. Sam asks, are there animals, pets, dogs in the afterlife? I think we know the answer to this, but Nicole?
Of course there are. When we build that relationship with pets, with our dogs, cats, horses, whatever, when we help them to get that human aspect, basically, because they live in our homes or in our environment, and when there is that relationship of love between us, then yes, they will be there. And I can give you so many examples of animals coming back into the seance room. Like I mentioned in the beginning, my own cat passed to the spirit world about a year ago, and when he was alive, he always liked to be close to the seance room and the circle. Since he is in spirit, he was the first one who came. He made himself heard and he jumped on someone's lap. And I had the same experience with dogs as well. Yeah.
And I want to point out, this is another great way to just take this whole subject home and completely eliminate the skeptic arguments, because how does a fraudulent medium bring in people's pets? Are they dressing up like a dog and going on all fours? I don't think so. So I think we're just about out of time, but I want to get to at least a couple more questions, because people are all putting them in here at the end. Keely asks, how many years did it take for you to arrive at the point you're at now with physical mediumship?
I started doing mediumship about 15 years ago with healing, psychic development, and I sit for physical mediumship now for 6.5, 7 years.
Keely asks, so animals do come through during sessions? The answer to that is yes, correct?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, and then Michelle Caputo asks, Let me try to translate this to a question I can ask. So if somebody materializes into a seance room and then they hug, they physically touch a sitter, does that not affect the ectoplasm, or does it not like potentially hurt you?
Yeah. Okay. So the spirit will decide what will happen. So if they plan to touch their loved one, then they do something to the ectoplasm to make it more safe. But it's not that the loved one in the seance room can suddenly touch the ectoplasm, because that will harm me. But if it's coming from if it's the spirit decision, then they know what to do, and then it can be safe as long as it's their decision.
And then a follow up to that. So that's why you are in closets, the cabinets, is to reduce contact. Is that correct?
Yeah, I sit in a cabinet. I'm strapped to the chair, and in the home circle, I'm even gagged, so I can't speak. I can't do anything.
And by virtue of being in the cabinet, that's to reduce the possible contact.
Yeah.
Interesting. Got it. Okay. Well, I guess I'm sure you have a busy schedule there, Nicole. I don't want to keep you here all night or all morning, all night there,
Yeah.
all early morning here, all afternoon for everybody else, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe if somebody wants to do one last question, you can write it in chat or speak up now. We'll do one more and then we'll close up shop. Anybody? Nope. Okay, so I guess I will address the last question. Nicole, you mentioned work with Leslie Keene. Is there any other way to keep in touch with you? Do you have a website? Any other plans coming up? Anything you want to share with Afterlife?
Yeah.
Our group.
I have a website. It's nicoledehaas.nl, and there is a wonderful place in Holland called the Zwanenhof, and you can have a look online on zwanenhof.com. It's a former retreat center. It's like a monastery. It's very big building, and we built a huge international mediumship program over the past 10 years. And a lot of people from all over the world, America, Australia, everywhere in Europe, they are coming to our courses on mediumship. And the Zwanenhof is one of the few places in the world at this moment where physical mediumship is becoming more and more prominent and getting a more important place within the field of mediumship.
And Zwanenhof
so you're very welcome.
Is that SWAV as in Victor ENHOFF, or am I?
It's a Z.
Okay.
ZW.
Okay, ZW.
ANENHOF.
So ZWAVEN, is that right?
ZWAN.
Okay.
ENHOF.
HOF. Okay, I'm going to write it in the chat so people can see how all of us folks who.
Yes, that's correct.
Got
that's
it. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a lot of us have a lot of us from purely English-speaking countries. I think we tend to. Hey, I spent a little bit of time living in the Czech Republic, and let me tell you something. That Czech is not an easy language, and I think the Netherlands as well. Dutch is I think easier than Czech. I think Czech is the most difficult one of all. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. This has been really great. It's been really fascinating. I'm really happy that I had you here, especially because we can look into physical mediumship, how evidential it is, the consistent information we get from the other side of what their world is like, as well as essentially the proof of physical mediumship being real in the sense of how long it takes to develop as a medium, how slow that process is, how that ultimately disproves like most of the skeptical arguments about how physical mediumship operates. So I think all that's really important. I will have this up on YouTube. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. You can get involved with afterlifetopics.com, Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics Facebook group. If you want to become a patron of this work, then you could join these classes, Afterlife University. So that information is afterlifetopics.com/university. We actually meet 8 times a week, and always be great to bring more patrons. More budget for this work will also translate into possible future projects. I'd love to do some boots on the ground investigative work in the future. So if anybody wants to become a patron of this work, please let me know. And I guess that's it. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to help keep this work going. And I guess that's it. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Nicole. And I'll see you guys on the next video or on the next class.